My name is Dr. Ysrael Levitz. Before I was a doctor and a psychologist, I spent several years as a Rav Kehilati, a 400 family Kehila in New York and Long Island. I'm a Musmach of Rav DR Zatzal. And I spent 6 years in the Rabbanut, and then was Mekayim the Pasuk, Shei Shanim Ta'avod Uvashri Yetzi Lachov Shechinam. This היה חינם. But I never fully left the rabbinate, because I left the rabbinate, but I never left Rabbanim. So I started a program at Yeshiva University in rabbinic counseling. I put out a book with Rav Avram Twersky on rabbinic counseling, which you can find now on Amazon. And I have a special love for Rabbanim, because I know what you're doing, because I was there. But I also learned how little Rabbanim are prepared to do the work of Rabbanut when it comes to counseling, and when it comes to the difficult problems that we're talking about today. So, let me tell you what I have in mind today. I want to talk a little bit about alimut. I don't know what was said here before. I heard some of the speaking, but I want you to understand alimut on a different level. Not all of us see alimut. Sometimes we see alimut and we don't really want to see it. Your question before, Rav, was a good question. Why don't Rabbanim report? If you see alimut, report. So let's talk about that. But first, let's talk a little bit about alimut. Alimut here in Eretz Yisrael, sexual alimut on children became a law in 1990. At that point, there was something like a few hundred cases in 1990 that were reported. Every year it went up. Today, there are over 300,000 cases of alimut, sexual alimut to children here in Israel. So it's not that...
What does that mean? Court or a report?
Reported. 96% of the time, it's true. So it's a problem that is vast. Right now, when I made Aliyah, I had the schus of opening up a training institute for the Dati Haredi community and a clinic for the Dati Haredi community where it doesn't cost very much. For $6, $7, $10, the equivalent, 40, 50 shekel. A family can come. We have a yechidah for alimut. We have a yechidah for alimut min li'eladim, and with the best people. And we have couples that are all for datim charedim with therapistim who are datim charedim here in Yerushalayim, B'nevei Yerushalayim.
Dr. Levitz, who pay for all the support of the families there? 45 shekels is nothing.
Good. It's a good question. It's a question for somebody who is apparently running an institution.
Right.
So B'nevei Yerushalayim,
Pound the beat.
Nivei Yerushalayim does a lot of the fundraising. We have people who are donors. We have the patent that I have is that the people who do the tipul are all therapists who pay for advanced training. So they pay. I don't pay the therapists. That's the patent. They're happy because they're getting the best supervision. And the clients, the Kehillah is happy. They pay very, very little. We deal with the poorest people where there's nothing in the refrigerator. Where sometimes we even give them coffee to come to tipul. Where we treat a whole family for 50 shekel. It's like there's no other place like this. There's an article in the Jerusalem Post this coming week or in 2 weeks on what we do. And Baruch Hashem, it's a tremendous chasdei Hashem that I was zochet to be able to start this. We see 400 cases a week. We have 50 therapists, all Dati Haredi therapists, and we put out about 200 religious therapists throughout Israel. And all of them have a background in alimut because it's one of our yichidot. Okay, so that gives you a background as to where I have any kind of mumchiyut in this. I'm a clinical psychologist. I was a professor at Yeshiva University for 25 years as a psychologist, and I was in practice. That's my background. So I always put it together with Rabbanut. What do you have to know about abuse? What do you need to know about abuse? So there are different kinds of abuse. There is, you're aware of this, I'm sure, there's physical abuse. There's emotional abuse. There's sexual abuse. And there are little abuses in between, which we'll talk about. What is physical abuse? I just want to say one other thing. There's some research that has been done recently. I saw the research, but it's not allowed to be published. The person that paid for the research says you can't publish it. We wanted to know, is there more alimut, is there more abuse from people than there is amongst chilonim? Baruch Hashem, it's not more, but it's not less. It's not less.
That's what the head of the police department said.
That's what he said.
Exactly what
Yeah.
the
He
rabbi
says it's not less. So we have a problem. What makes alimut, and I like your question.
And how do you explain it?
Huh?
I mean, we are
Yeah.
ages,
Let-
gently
Let me tell you
talking.
something. Many years ago, when I was a professor, so one of my students said to me, I'm working in, she mentions the name of a frum community, and there are cases of incest. I said, incest? No.
That's not impossible.
No, that's not. There's no cases. I said, no, that's an exaggeration. No, I'm working with religious people. There's incest. Years later, I was on the board of UJA Federation, and somebody came and they said they're working with groups of women who have suffered from incest. It's a sensitive mic. They have suffered from incest, and she needs support. She walked out of the room. I told the board, it's an exaggeration. Fortunately, I met her in Eretz Yisrael. She was at one of our seminars. I publicly apologized to her. We have, amongst our caseload, 400 cases a week. We have about, not with all incest, Baruch Hashem, but we have close to 40% of a history of alimut amongst our 400 cases a week. So, even though we are not worse than the rest, we should be better. We expect to be better. We have a problem, and we need to understand what the problem is. And more than that, I'm going to ask you to hold your questions. And
No, I
then,
just didn't understand. Why did you apologize? I didn't.
why did I what?
Apologize to the lady.
Oh, I apologized to the lady because I turned her down for funding.
Okay.
I apologize. I owed her an apology. I bring this up a lot when I talk about alimut in my own machon, because chatasi, I couldn't, like you, I couldn't imagine what we are seeing today. One of the things that we've been able to do, Baruch Hashem, is to educate Rabbanim. We're a Haredi institution, and it took time till Rabbanim understood, because just like you're finding it difficult to picture it, so did we, but we learned, and so did Rabbanim. Because, they don't teach this in yeshiva. And understanding halacha doesn't necessarily give you the awareness of what could be. So, Baruch Hashem, we have many poskim now who understand that if we don't report a case of child abuse and something happens, one of us could go to jail. 3 months if it's a person who is not professional, and 6 months for a professional. And I think Rabbanim fit into the category of professional, if you know of something like this. But nevertheless, we have had cases of, let's start with physical abuse. I told you there are different kinds of abuses. Let's start with physical abuse. What's physical abuse? hitting, punching, cutting, choking, burning. We're talking about a mother who came to us recently who pulled a knife. This wasn't recently, this was a while back. Pulled a knife on her children, ran after them with a knife. And then the children hid and she didn't do any damage. We knew about that. We had to report. So we went to a Rav, one of the poskim here in Yerushalayim.
Why need to go to Europe?
Good question. We asked that question too, but I'll tell you why. But can I ask you to hold your question? Your questions are good, but it'll throw me off. I want to focus. So, but I'll try and answer the question. So we had a case of a man who threw his 5-year-old son on the floor and jumped on him with his knees.
What?
And jumped on him with his knees.
One time, or he did it constantly? Got it.
Okay, he did it once.
Okay,
One
not
is
too
enough.
bad.
Robert,
Once,
it's
not
enough.
so bad. Ulai magia
One
lo.
is enough.
Yeah, not too bad. Well, everybody loses their temper, except against our wives.
So that was the attitude of the Rav. The Rav says, how many once? No problem.
I agree with him.
Okay? That doesn't mean either of you are right.
But there is a saying,
Okay.
That means I'm right.
if he does it once, נעשה לו כהיתר.
Lega.
No, שלושה פעמים.
We are not,
It was only a
we're
report.
not talking.
No.
I need to explain something. I know it's the minhag amongst Rabbanim. I've spoken to many groups of Rabbanim. The minhag of Rabbanim, it's like a shir, you know? You have a kasha, you have to ask the kasha. Hold the kashas, and I hope I can get to all of them.
Okay.
Okay, but the problem with that kind of alimut, I'm not talking about a child who crosses the street and you take him, a 4-year-old child, and say, don't do that again. That wouldn't be alimut. I wouldn't consider it. You take a child and
Is
throw him
that good or
down.
bad?
We have to hold the questions. So if that wouldn't be a reportable thing, but to throw a child down and to jump on him, you can do serious damage. When we talk about doing serious damage, that's something else. If somebody can do that to their child, what will happen the next time? We're not talking about, a father who yells at a child, or a father who gives a little punch when it's dangerous. We're not talking about a regular way. There are so many better ways of chanoch l'nara pi darko. That's not. It's over on the Ahavta l'reacha kamocha. It's over even on the halachas of tochacha. That's not the kind of parenting we want to see, because we also see what happens when there's violence as parenting, or where there's any kind of sexual abuse or emotional abuse. We simply lose Yidden as they grow up. They just leave. But putting that aside. So we went to the Rabbanim, and the Rabbanim said, there were 2 Rabbanim, each related to the families that this happened. And the Rav said, look, nothing much happened. I'll speak to him. We were obligated to educate the Rav, and Rabbanim have been educated to know that this needs to be reported. When it's reported, it doesn't mean the person goes to jail. It means that they send down experts who talk to the family, who are out to protect the children. Because the next time, that knee that the father jumped on could be on his head, not on he lost control. How do people become so violent? We take a guy. I want you to do an exercise. I'm not going to do the only work in this room. I want you to do the next. I want you to think of one of your balabatim. Are all of you in Rabbanis? Everybody in Rabbanis?
Either in or studying to be.
Studying to be. Say, if you are in Rabbanis, I want you to think of one of your balabatim who maybe goes to your Daf Yomi Shir, who's like a real ehrlich guy, who davens the Kavon Rabbah. Think of him for a moment. And imagine somebody coming to you and telling you that he jumped on his kid. And he's like a chashuv guy in your kehillah. You feeling a little less comfortable, I hope?
It's very hard to think about this because I don't have the yummy.
Because you're not that young, you know? Okay, so this is totally not shaykh to you, obviously. Do you give any shiurim? Think of somebody in your shiurim.
Tommy's
Impossible to think like this.
It's hard.
Very hard.
Can you think of?
I couldn't see this guy.
You know what?
Again.
Wait. I want to tell you something. You know, people who abuse don't wear signs. They don't wear signs. The ones that abuse. I'll give you a story. Talk about abuse. A patient of mine, a very elegant woman, looks very put together, very wealthy family. Came in, and she, as it unfolded, it was clear that she was abused. What's pshat, abused? Well, the last time her husband threw a plate at her head, split her head open. When Hatzolah came, she said she bent down and she hit the cabinet in the corner and it blew. It was an accident. Why? She said, because nobody would believe that my husband, who's the nicest guy, who's the most mechubad guy, who was honored last year by the yeshiva, he was given the Chasdei Emes award or something like that, right? That he would do a thing like that. So the woman doesn't report because he comes off, these guys are manipulated, these guys have a face that you can't believe that they would do that. Now there are psychological reasons why a man would do a thing, lose such control. And there are many theories. And some of you may have even heard of some of these theories. By now I can tell you that some of the theories you heard are not true. There is one theory, one observation. I don't know if it's a theory, it's a notion. That there is a cycle of violence. Did you ever hear of the cycle of violence?
Sure.
The cycle, right, everybody knows, it's mikubal. Okay, so we have some kashas on the cycle of violence. It doesn't seem to be true. Women don't come in and say, what's the cycle of violence? For those of you who, Baruch Hashem, are not aware of it. The cycle of violence is, it starts off with him building up attention. He's building attention, and she can feel it, and she's like walking on eggshells, and she's very nervous, and all of a sudden there's an explosion, and he hits her, or he throws something at her, or he chokes her, or something. He just explodes. And then the third phase is called the honeymoon phase, where he brings her flowers, he says, I'm sorry, and then he goes back to the other phase. That has been the way of thinking, I think, for the last 20 years. Except that women don't tend to report that. They talk about the honeymoon phase, they said it's a manipulative phase. He's manipulating, he's not, she knows, and she's just trying to keep herself safe. So these kinds of theories, there are other theories, psychoanalytic theories, but to a very great degree, one of the things we do know is that men who abuse have a sense of magiali, they have a sense of entitlement. They have a sense that a woman is on another level than him. They have a sense that it could be cultural in many respects. Ze gever. That's what a man is. A man has to, when he says something. One of the things that's most frightening is that children who are brought up in such homes don't know any different. One story that came to me recently of a Kala who was visiting her chosn for Shabbos with his family. And the chosn's father calls out to the mother, Chana, bring me tea. She doesn't answer. Talibim b'intayim. You say that? Okay. He yells out again, Chana, my tea.
Please.
She's busy in the kitchen. And then he yells out, Chana, my tea! Oh. She comes, she brings him the tea. As she puts down the tea, he slaps her face. The Kala is sitting there. She's terrified. So after the meal, she turns to the chassan and she says, listen, I'm really sorry for what happened, but you know, between us, it's good. He said, what happened? She said, your father slapped your mother. He said, yeah, but she didn't bring the tea. So that was the end of that.
No question.
He didn't, no question, no, he didn't bring the, it's like that was normal. That was normal. So children that are brought up in homes where there is abuse, it's normal. Of course and also women who come with being abused physically, they tend to minimize. They minimize. I asked the office to run off a few sheets of what you need to know to be able to talk to such a woman and what you need to know to be able to talk to an abuser.
Do you want us to hand them out?
No, you don't have to hand it out now, no.
No, because we did it.
Good.
There's a
Kol
copy.
hakavod. You can give it right afterwards.
Yeah.
So, see, I lose my train of thought as soon as you. Okay, so in terms of physical abuse, there's a minimization. A woman will say, well, I know why he threw the toaster because I burnt the toast. I should have watched it. I know, but the children were sick, and I was watching the kids, and I know he doesn't like burnt toast, so he
You
threw
know,
the
it
toast.
sounds good in English. I cannot even imagine this in Hebrew.
You can imagine.
Unbelievable.
יש סיבה שהוא זרק את הטוסטר.
No, I understand what he's saying, but I cannot imagine someone saying something like this in Hebrew. You know, it's shocking.
They
He's
say
an idiot.
They say no,
Saying such a.
except if you're an abused woman. You see, because then you really begin to understand. When you're an abused woman, you think there's something wrong with you, and that you've done something wrong. I'll talk in a moment. I really don't want to hold you too long. I had prepared to speak for an hour, and I'm going to make it more of a kid's. I want to go on to emotional abuse. What does emotional abuse mean? Emotional abuse is not if you have an argument with your wife and you say, "Ah, that's shtus." No, we're not talking about disagreements. Disagreements with your wife is part of the shleimus of the shalom bayis. But we're talking about a consistent, pervasive belittling of putting down the other person. Now, the 95% of alimut is male against female, 5% is female against male. In emotional abuse, I'm not sure what the statistics is. We see it going in both directions. But a mate, I think it's probably also mostly in the direction of male against female, but I'm not sure I haven't seen recent statistics on emotional abuse. Emotional abuse can be verbal, where the person's constantly putting them down, or it could be nonverbal. Nonverbal is silent treatment. You walk into the room, you say, "Hi, good morning," nothing. You say, "How are you?" Nothing. "Anything for dinner?" No. Puts out the dinner, nothing, but doesn't say a word. The verbal abuse, to give you an idea, I had a case of a man who was constantly putting his wife down because after birth she put on some weight. Not unusual. But, I mean, there's a research that people quote, though you'll judge for yourself how true it is, that women who put on a little weight live longer than men who mention it. Not true. Okay. So in this case, he mentioned it. "Oh boy, you fat. Look at those pulkas. Look, oh God, you're gonna eat that? You're like a pig already. You're like a pig already." And then she told me at one point, now this is not making her feel very good about herself, obviously. At one point, he said to her, he took from the top of her head to the bottom of her feet, he analyzed every part of her body, made nothing of it. So she said to him, so why do you even want to sleep with me? He says, I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why. He says, a man is hungry. He wants steak. He can't find steak. All he has is potato chips. You're a potato chip. That's verbal abuse. That's emotional abuse. That's tearing somebody down. When she came in for therapy, this is a woman, incidentally, who was at the top of her Beis Yaakov class, the most popular girl in Beis Yaakov. Came in, she felt like she had to be rebuilt. As soon as she became a little stronger, her husband picked it up, found out she was going to therapy, wanted to report me for abusing patients. He called the American Psychological Association, and she was terrified. She came in to tell me his story, that he called and he asked if anybody knows of Dr. Levitz, if he's ever sexually abused any women. They said, no, do you want to report? He says, no, not yet. So he was holding it over me, because what I was doing is I was upsetting his whole world. He had her down, and here she was being built up in therapy. So I wasn't afraid. I really didn't care. I had to do whatever I had to do. But I want you to understand that it's much easier for me as a psychologist to do this work than it is for you as Rabbanim, because of the fact that because we all know the insecurities of Rabbanus, that you're being paid by a kehillah, and that if you report somebody who makes a tumult, the agmas nefesh that you have is greater than mine as a psychologist. The silent treatment is a serious treatment. A man and a woman patients of mine go on a cruise. She walks into the room and she says, it's a little small. He stopped talking to her for the next 10 days. She was on there alone. So that's also abuse.
Why? It depends of her if she care or not care.
Okay, so I'm ignoring that. How do you feel? You're okay. I tell her to say that we're not married. But imagine if we were married.
Go for the hell.
What would you do?
She can't tell him, go for the hell. She can divorce. It's up to her how she wants to make it.
Let me ask you something.
It
If your
depends if
wife
you are in
stops-
South America or in United States.
If your wife stopped talking to you for 10 days,
I wish to.
wouldn't be so lucky, huh?
Guys,
You know, I once heard, I had an Italian barber once, and I heard him say to somebody, women, you can't live with them and you can't kill them. If you really cared for your wife, and I'm sure you do, but if you really cared for her and she cut you off, or if a parent cuts off a child, it's painful. Like, you're not machshav them at all. So, especially in an intimate relationship, that's a form of abuse. Okay, can you hear me anyway?
oh yeah.
Now, given the time restraints,
Speak, alone. לא צריך.
so non-physical abuse is rejecting, it's degrading, it's terrorizing. Imagine a husband, stands over his wife like this.
That's right.
He's a big guy, and she's a woman, and he says, if you don't, it's terrorizing. She never knows. He doesn't hit her, no marks, but it's terrorizing. That's also non-verbal abuse. Incidentally, what research we do have from people in the field is that Talmidei Chachamim are better at abusing than non-Talmidei Chachamim. They're much smarter at it. Maybe not so smart because there are plenty in jail.
They don't
But
give signs.
They don't give signs. That's right. When they hit in a place where there's no marks. When they terrorize, they terrorize. When they give a sharp remark, it can tear the woman down. And that's what we find, that Talmidei Chachamim are better at abuse than Stam Goyim.
Wow.
So, but it makes sense. It makes sense. So now, one of the forms of emotional abuse that you may or may not ever come to you is something called spiritual abuse. Spiritual abuse. So, the first thought I had when I heard this is, Nochem abuse. It's like, all right, we don't have enough, now we have spiritual abuse. But listen, spiritual abuse was first recognized in the Christian community. And then we began to see it in our community. What is it? It's a form of abuse where you use religion, bayas halacha, to control the mate. So, for example, a guy says to his wife, he says, look, you're my Yeshes Chayil, and the health of this family depends on your tefillas. So you have to have kavanah. So she has kavanah, she has 2 kids, 3 kids, 4, she has kavanah, the kids get sick. He said, did you have kavanah? Did you say Rofei Cholim with, did you? She says, yeah, I think he said, you probably didn't do it well enough. He says, you know something? You should start saying all of Tehillim every day. Or else the kids will get sick, it's your fault. So she says, well, let me ask my Rav. He says, no, what does he know? He's Mevatel the Rav. He's the Rav. So he cuts her off from any kind of a reasonable Rabbonis. And he isolates her, and anything that goes wrong is her fault. That's one example.
What does he say to
A
you?
man we'll talk about how a girl gets to this madrega that she accepts this. A woman goes shopping in a kosher supermarket and has to call her husband for everything she puts in the basket. Everybody thinks, oh, what tzaddikim. But if she puts something in the basket that he's not masking to, she has big problems. We had one case that Rahman and Itzlan did not end well. It ended in suicide, where a man told his wife when she's a nida, she can't stay in the house. She has to go outside and be in a shack because she's metame the whole house. She ended up committing suicide. We had a man who told his wife she can't get undressed in the shower because Madach, when she takes her shekel off, she makes the walls of the house tamei. Halachas kam v'kamim, she gets completely undressed. Okay? So you say, it's mishagas, yes, but not to her. So how did a girl who went to a frum school, grew up in a Beis Yaakov, let us say, how does she get to such a matzav that she believes a guy like this? So this is the way it goes. It goes something like this. She goes out with a guy. What was she taught when she, in school, in her seminary? Marry a Talmud Chacham, marry a Ben Torah, marry a guy who can learn. This guy, on the date, starts talking, Divrei Torah, Shach, Hataz, he's making, she's so impressed. And he says to her, by the second date, he says, I just want you to know, I appreciate your ruchnius. You have such a level of ruchnius. And she's like anointed. It's the second stage. She's anointed. She is like his malka in ruchnius. And we're going to build a bias neman b'Yisrael, you and I, because I know what level you're on. And she's so happy that this guy who she is going to marry anointed her to be his partner. And then it begins. It begins with him piling more and more on her, little by little. Little by little, more and more chumras that become more and more difficult for her. And then comes failure. because it's impossible when you have 4 or 5 kids to say all of Tehillim once or twice a day. So she's going to fail, or whatever else he holds her up to. And when she fails, he destroys her. He says, you've been metame this entire house. Go to the mikveh. At least, he will make up. And she said, if she asks, can I ask my Rav? He says, don't bother with him. We don't hold by him. That's abuse, no? Shem Shemayim abuse. So you may not see these cases because you're not good enough, but you might hear about them because we're first discovering that it is pervasive, particularly in the religious community. Now I want to talk about sexual abuse. Now listen, we all have an idea of what sexual abuse is. I have to tell you that when I teach very experientially. Why? It goes to a different part of the brain. If I would just lecture to you, it's going to one part of the brain. I'm sure you're listening. I hope you're listening. But when we deal experientially, it goes to a different part of the brain. So let me first briefly tell you what sexual abuse is. Sexual abuse, bepashtus, is any sexual touch, any touch at all, that's not wanted. It's not wanted. It could be any place. It could be any place. It could be on the hand. If you want to shake a woman's hand, she doesn't want to, and you go and you grab her hand, that's kfiyah. That's kfiyah. It's not respect. You're crossing a boundary. Alachas kama v'chama if she is touched in a place that she doesn't want to be touched. Now, sexual abuse is also marital rape, forcing oneself on a wife who doesn't want to be with you at that particular point in time. Now there are halachas on that. Halachically, we know that to force yourself on your wife is not what we call the ahavta l'reacha kamocha. Exploring with a child pornography. Sitting down with a child and watching pornography. Leaving a door open to a child's room and watching a child get undressed. That's a sexual abuse. Certainly touching a child in a way that you and I would never believe years ago, and I certainly didn't, is also very clearly sexual abuse. Now, what's the impact of sexual abuse on children? This you have to know. You know, a very edel girl from Beis Yaakov who's in an elevator, and a guy gets in the elevator, touches her and runs. She's quite traumatized, incidentally, very traumatized. Now, if it's a Chiloni girl and a guy doesn't know, she says, oh, yeah, whatever. It won't have the same kind of trauma. So the trauma depends on who does it and to whom and for how long. It's very different if it's somebody who touches you once and doesn't do it anymore, or if it's a relative who lives with you, who virtually has sexual relations with you or touches you on a regular basis, or if it's a rebbe or a teacher, somebody that you trust who does that. And Rahman and Itzlan, we know that this exists, we know that it happens. Maybe that's why a conference like this didn't take place 10 years ago, but we know that it happens, and that's a kind of abuse that has terrible consequences. Now, at Neve, where I am, Neve, most of you may know, is a girls' there are like 11 schools at Neve. We are the clinic of Neve for the Kehillah. When the girls get to about the age of 18 and the teachers start talking about marriage, they panic, those who have been sexually abused. Because to experience with a man what you experience with your brother or are experiencing with your brother is devastating. You just don't know what to do with it. Aside from the fact that many of these girls get depressed, many of these girls refer to themselves as garbage, I'm garbage, refer to themselves as a used car, and when you feel that way about yourself, even the idea that, wait, it wasn't your fault, they did it to you, somebody like a parent who did that to you, they're the ones that are guilty, not you. That's not the rationale. That doesn't go. It doesn't go for other reasons too, because they feel that maybe they were shutfin. Maybe they also enjoyed it a little bit, maybe, and even though it was wrong, maybe, and besides, Abba loves me, and it's confusing, but they know they feel like used goods, not so good, and they panic. We see a lot of those girls amongst our 40% who have been sexually abused. Now, in the long run, many of these girls do not have good relationships, sexual relationships with their husbands. Some of them,
If they get married.
there's such pressure in our community to get married that people get married and the problems come out in marriage. So it's not something that is openly discussed, I was sexually abused, but it comes out later in marriage, and then we see it. So the long-term effects include suicide, include going off the derech, because if you're in a family that's not protecting you, and your father, the tzaddik, is somebody who did things to you, what's this Yiddishkeit about? Here's the Rebbeinu Shalom, and just you leave. And we have all too many boys and girls who have been sexually abused. I've been talking a lot about girls being abused, but boys being sexually abused too, by rebbes or by older boys or by relatives, and they lose a sense of themselves and a trust in Yahadus. So we suffer very much because of that. Now look, I don't know how many of you have seen cases of sexual abuse in families. Have any of you seen that? Seen the case? You have. I want to read something to you. Whoops. Oh, no. I'll Thank you so much. Thank you. I want you to imagine, I'm getting to your question. What is your name?
Kotel, like the kotel.
Of Kotel. Or as my family in New York says, of Koisel. Very often, people will come, and they're in their early 20s, and report on sexual abuse in the family in order to protect a younger sibling who they see as being abused in the same way. They were quiet with regard to themselves because it would mean throwing the whole family out of line, imagine. Or they tried to report it and the mother said, no, you're imagining it, just be quiet, don't say anything to anybody. But when they see a younger sibling, a brother or sister, being abused, they report it. So imagine this. I ask you to imagine somebody in your kehillah who is a chashuv guy. You think comes across as a chashuv guy. How many of you were able to imagine a chashuv person in your kehillah? If you're not yet in Rabbanis, think of a chashuv person you know from your shul. Raise your hand when you can think of a chashuv person. Anybody here know any chashuv people? Raise your hand if you know anybody chashuv. You know chashuv person. Now I don't want to be chashuv b'ksherim, so this is only an exercise. But imagine now, an answer to your question. Imagine now that the older daughter of this chashuv man comes to you and says, I want you to know, Rabbi, my father sexually abused me. And now he's doing it to my sister. And you say, your father, he's such a hush of a guy. She says, Rabbi, I want to read you a letter that I'm thinking of sending to my father. Incidentally, the letter I'm going to read you, and I am going to ask Mechila Lechatchila Lemafreya. Mechila Lemafreya. I cleaned the language as best I could, but I need to read it for you to get a sense that you can't get if I stop speaking about it. And think now of somebody who you would never imagine would be involved like this. And she reads you the letter. Dear Abba, F you. That's a new word I learned in the big, bad, secular world. And I think it describes what you did to me. Let me remind you, I was 10 or maybe 11, and we were best friends. You always promised me that I was your favorite daughter and that you loved me so much. But you lied. You loved only yourself. Yourself and your sexual desires. What you did to me, Abba, when you came into my bed at night, I hated. My head digging into the mattress. I wanted to scream, to tell you to stop, but I didn't. I hated it, Abba. Abba, I hated it. But I know you wanted it, and I didn't say anything. I couldn't say anything. I don't know why. You were always complaining about time, about how time flies, and I would grow up and get married and fly far away from you, and you would be all alone. And I said, no, no, Abba, I would never leave you, because I loved you so much. My favorite Abba, who turned me into a corpse. So when I got married, that's what I was, and still am, and always will be. Abba, I need $1 million. That's 100,000 hours of therapy. It should last me a lifetime. Abba, I need a new body, a fresh one, one without scars, without the shadow of your hands running all over it. Abba, I need a new mind, one without memories of your touch, of your breath, of your desire. Abba, I need a new father, one without gentle, strong hands, without fraudulent love, crazy, out of control. So I can be a woman, so I can be normal, so I can love, so I can have sex. You see, Abba, at school they told me many things. They told me not to speak lashon hara of others. They told me always to obey my parents, kibbud aveim. They told me not how to dress modestly and be tznius. They told me to pray fervently with kavanah, but they never told me not to have sex with my father. So I did. I obeyed everything you told me. Then I got married, and they told me nothing. But we figured out something together. That what my husband does to me as a man, you do to me as a father. When a dad acts like a man to a daughter, he is a murderer, a murderer, a murderer. And I want to ask you, my Abba, who is a murderer, one question which will never be answered, a question which will never be asked, a question I live with, I sleep with, I die with. A question my husband lives with, touches me with. Why? Why have you betrayed me? Why did you love me? Why? Why do I still love you and miss you and want you? And I now know that you knew what you did was wrong. And now I know that you knew that I did not what I did not. I saw your face, guilty, hiding, quickly shutting the door, washing your hands. No one should see. Ima's footsteps, and I knew to get dressed quickly. I was your sweet little prostitute, ignorant, innocent, and you took me, my love, my trust, and twisted it, distorted it, destroyed it, and lied. Why, Abba? But Abba, I'm totally off tangent, so forget it. Let me start this letter again. Dear Abba, you damn murderer. You killed your daughter, an innocent little girl. And the dead little girl is forever buried deep, deep within me, forever. Abba, may you rot in hell. Love, your daughter Aviva. You can find this if you Google Dr. David Ribner's article called The Dead Little Girl. It's in my Shahaya. She was a brilliant writer, so she's able to bring clarity as to what that's like.
You said the website is? Doctor?
Google The Dead Little Girl, Dr. David Ribner,
Ribner.
if you want to reread it. But you're going to be reading it in more foul language than I did.
Can I ask
You-
you something?
Now wait,
You
I'm
read,
going to ask you something.
you read it wonderful. You read
Okay,
it
wait. Okay, let me ask you something. Okay, what do you do as a Rav?
Be shocked, nothing,
Nothing.
nothing. Tell her she's crazy.
What?
Tell her she's crazy.
It sounds like she's crazy.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. So what makes you think she's crazy? Where is your degree in psychology? It's what?
It's unbelievable.
Unbelievable. Does that make her crazy?
I mean, I can't handle it.
You what?
You have to deny it.
Who has to?
The rabbi, he's not,
The
he's
rabbi
not
has
going to accept
to.
this.
The rabbi has to deny
He's
it.
not going to, because he's not come to.
He can't take it. You talk about yourself now. If you were the rabbi, you are the rabbi, you couldn't conceive of this, right? Okay? So what do? So you do nothing. I have 2 votes for nothing. What would you do?
What I would do is,
One moment, one at a time.
first of all, I would check out, I mean, do I know this girl? So I can simply say that she's stable, she cannot imagine something like this. And if I have the answer for that,
Okay. so
knowing the
since-
girl,
So wait, she was giving you problems in the school that she was going to. She was giving you problems.
right, so I'm
Yeah.
saying,
Oh, so
if I know. the
you know
girl-
why she's giving you problems?
What do you mean giving me a problem?
She's giving you problems, she's acting out, she's never in school, she fights. she
Troublemaker, yeah.
She's a troublemaker. Whatever the troublemaker is, would you still think she's stable?
What I'm trying to say is very simple. If I know the girl, then I don't need too much of more information to give her a credit. So what I would do, I would ask her, can you tell me this in front of your father?
Wait, now
Right.
when I was
Okay,
hearing,
she'll say, I cannot.
Wait,
Then I will go with her.
Hold on one second.
Then I will go with her to the police.
You have to buy a beit kvarot. If
Right.
you attend with the
one moment.
She's gonna kill you.
One moment.
Right?
My question to you as a Rav, and so far I want to respond to some of your responses, which I understand. I started this talk by telling you that I was in denial of this years ago, and I was a psychologist and I saw people, blah. I was in denial. I thought I was sophisticated. That's, with this stuff, and it goes on, and it goes on. I wasn't so sophisticated. I'm a little more sophisticated now, but I still want to tell you that now and then I get shocked. But the fact that you are saying I wouldn't do anything, or I would think she's crazy, which is blaming the victim. But once you say, but what about this girl? So let's say the girl was acting out, she was very, a tumultuous girl in school, she looked crazy. But do you understand why she would be?
Sure.
Okay, so now, does this explain to you why she was so crazy in school? Or does this say to you, no, Raya, she's crazy because I know from before?
Definitely. If I see that she's having a problem, also in school, that's even making it even stronger. So I would call her a professional, or I would accompany her to the police.
Or you what?
Accompany her to the police.
Okay.
Most probably,
Alright.
because you're in your state, this girl would not come to you because you don't know how to read the problem.
And this
She's
is
not
why
gonna come to you.
But this is why I don't understand why, from the first place, you need to go to a rabbi for that.
I'll tell you why.
Because they need
I'll tell
help.
you why. No, there's something else also. First of all, Rabbanim, charismatic Rabbanim are trusted people. You're somebody she can trust. If she went to school with you and you had a good, warm, nice relationship, a supportive, beautiful relationship with her as a Rav should have with his Talmidim, she trusts you and she'll come in, she'll be says, starts to cry, I've got to tell you something, it's so hard to believe, but I want to tell you. And she's crying and she tells you this Maisa. Okay? Are you having a chrayas, right? I mean, there are a lot of inyanim here. There's an inyan of Mesira. There's an inyan of Losaman al Damrayecha. There's an inyan of Chil Hashem. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on here that has to go through your head. Is he a rodeh? If he's not a rodeh, there are a lot of halachic issues. Put the halachic issues aside for a moment. You have on the one hand a legal obligation. On the other hand, it's imun. And yet there are younger children who are now at risk. So if anything happens to them, it's your achrayus.
Right.
You've been the one that was lo saman al damrayecha. It's not pasha. You asked the question before, how come rabbis just don't report? Because it's sometimes not believable. It doesn't go into our heads. It's like we have an image of Bnei Yisrael being much pure, and some of Bnei Yisrael are pure as a people, as a tzibur. We also have individuals who have cut off from that tzibur and cut off from their
But
way.
why you?
No, they're not Risha'im in everything.
Why did
What's
you?
that?
This guy, this father, I mean, he's not a Rasha in everything. He's Shomer Shabbat, he eats kosher, he davens, he does. That's what makes it so difficult. Because he's not a Rasha, he's just having relations with his daughter.
Worse than a-
Oh! No, but it doesn't make him evil and everything else. No, that's the problem.
I leave the schus mitzvahs to the Ribbon Shalom. I don't
No,
know.
you gotta kill the guy.
I don't.
I mean, not
You
kill
need to
him.
make.
Look, he can have his own minion in jail. I'm sure.
There's all
And there are-
Yeah, but why
But-
you went to ask rabbis? You
What's
said
that?
that you went to ask rabbis.
Why go to a Rav? I'll tell you why. I'm running an institute for the Kehillah. And if I report, the first thing people will say to me, who's your posek? Where's your das Torah? So I can say, listen, mister, if somebody rapes your wife, are you going to go to a Rav? You're going to go to the police.
Right.
If this is happening, but I can't say that. Why? Because I'm liable to be, as a menahel, I'm liable to be mekalkel, the whole institute, and what it's doing. If word gets out, what do they do at Machon Mishpacha? They take children away from the families. That's all I need is a shmua kazot. I can't do that. I have a Rav on the premises who goes to the different poskim. Anybody wants to speak to a Rav, we can go to the Rav. He knows the cases, and we do it in a very organized and legal way, so that we can get halachic coverage, and we go to Rabbanim who understand what so it meant that one of the things we were able to do, and we're doing this now for 18 years, one of the things we had to do is educate the Rabbanim, the poskim, as to what was involved. Because look how difficult it is for you to believe something like this, and I understand that. This is difficult to believe, but it's true. And it happens. And that's why I ask slicha mechila for having to read this, because it's not pleasant, but I don't think you're going to forget it so quickly.
And it's true.
Okay.
It's true more than one letter.
Yeah.
It's true on many, many letters. That's what they gotta do.
Yeah.
Because they'll walk out and say, oh, one girl was raped by her father.
No,
But
no,
it's not
no,
true.
no.
לא, זה מפחיד.
So I want to thank you very much.
I had, listen,
מה אתה מתעורר? מה אתה ישן?